Well, hey there, everybody. It's Snackbox, feeling cool as a cucumber today. I've got my stunner shades on here just so that you can see exactly how cool I am. Just kidding, everybody. Doing well here. Hope you are doing well as well. Welcome there to Quest and to Jerry. See you in the chat. Really excited to have you here with us today. I'm super excited about today because if you know anything about me, you know that I love top 5 lists. So I have a podcast I really love that does just top 5 lists, and I like making lists and sort of keeping with them. So really excited about getting into some of these top 5s of the Colorado Trail, and a lot of different topics we're going to cover today. We're going to talk about the top 5 most beautiful segments of the Colorado Trail, top 5 hardest segments of the Colorado Trail, in my humble opinion. And we're also going to talk about top 5 pieces of gear for the Colorado Trail, as well as top 5 breweries along the way. So when you're making that hike and stopping in for town days, where do you go grab a cold one on the way to make sure that you are fueled up and relaxed for the rest of that trip? So we have just a ton to talk about. And also the even bigger news, or the more exciting news, I don't know if it's exciting for you all, it's exciting for me. I reached 900 subscribers this week, and actually we reached that together. So I'm really grateful for all of you who have subscribed to the channel. It means a lot to me. We started this about a year and a half ago, and it's just sort of taken some time and grown, and I really have been grateful for the friendships and connections that I've made through the channel. So really grateful for all of you that I've met through the YouTube community. And as a thank you, I've got these as a giveaway toward the end of the live stream here. These are a couple of stainless steel outside comfort zone wine tumblers that you can take on your next backpacking trip, and we're going to be giving them away to somebody here in the chat who has made a comment. So be sure that you drop a couple of comments there, and that's really what this is all about, building up and thinking about that community there. And really excited to hopefully get to meet many of you between Denver and Durango this year. I'm still deciding on my exact start date, but it looks like it's going to be sometime in late June, early July. I know a lot of folks out there are planning a similar launch date, and really excited for that. So without further ado, let's start talking breweries. And this is one of the things that is just makes Colorado really special, is that you can throw a rock in any direction and hit a great brewery. So let's start talking about a couple of the ones that I really like and kind of going through those. This will be relatively quick, and then we're going to get into the heart of what I want to talk about, which is really those segments that I consider some of the more beautiful or even some of the more challenging ones. And when I say challenging, we're going to talk about what makes them really specifically challenging, because sometimes it's not the climb that makes them hard. Sometimes it will be things like when you start the climb or when you're out there on the trail. Those sort of things will be those sort of things can be part of that challenge, is the timing of it, or even maybe where it is in the hike relative to completing the hike, that kind of thing. So you'll get a better picture of that as we go. But I've also put together some clips of all of the different segments here. And I think that when you start seeing those segments, you're going to understand both why they're really challenging and also why they're really beautiful. And really and truly, I hope when you start seeing them, you're getting excited about your hike, because if you're thinking ahead 2-3 months out, chances are good you're already starting some of that training process and getting ready to get out there. And that's ultimately what's going to make your hike the best that you've had. But again, let's talk beer. Let's talk some of the best places along the way. One of my favorite places is in Lake City. It's the Lake City Brewing Company, and I like that I put it's in Lake City as if you weren't going to be able to figure that out. This is a really great stop, because if you stop there at the Raven's Rest whenever you are on your way through the segment, this is about mile 357. You'll get to Spring Creek Pass and you'll head into Lake City should you decide to go there. A lot of people choose Lake City or Creed, and so if you end up in Lake City, this is really great, because if you go to the Raven's Rest Hostel and stay for the night, the Lake City Brewing Company is in walking distance, as is everything in Lake City. It's all very easy to walk to, which again, we want to be really safe. So of course we don't want to be having any drinks and then driving. And this is also a great place that if you get to Lake City on Sunday, the local church does a dinner that's free for all hikers, and they're really welcoming. It's just a great city. I love the town, and truthfully, I'd love to live there at some point in my life. Now, if you don't go to Lake City, most people will turn off and head over to Creed about 30-40 miles before. And if you do end up in Creed, I encourage you to check out Square Peg Brew Works. And this one is really great. They've got some pizza there. They're sort of smaller pizzas, kind of thin crust or whatever flatbreads, I think they're called. So they've got some great food and some great eats. And it's also small town, really beautiful, kind of historic. There's a historic theater there that if you get there early enough and they have a show, definitely check it out. It's great for history buffs, great for that. And it's also a really good one to have some food the night before, because if you do decide to resupply there, you are going to start out with one of the tallest, steepest climbs. The next day, you're going to go up about 1,000 feet in a mile, and it can be really tough. So you want some of that, start carbo loading, you know what I mean? Really hit some of those carbs. But Crete is really super cool city. I think it's one that a lot of folks really like that. And I tell you, it's just a cool place. I got to visit it for the first time, believe it or not, last year, and I've done pass by, and I typically go to Lake City because I have a hostel there, and it's a little farther down the trail. But definitely check that one out if you're there. And then one stop just about everybody makes is there in Breckenridge. So you'll go to Breckenridge or Frisco. They have the free shuttle. At the Gold Hill Trailhead, you'll literally be able to take a free shuttle to either town. So this is almost a must stop for people when they go. It's 104 miles down the trail from Denver, and then you'll get there. And if you go south, you'll end up in Breckenridge. North, you'll end up in Frisco. And if you do end up in Breckenridge at, say, the Loge Hostel or even the Bivy Hostel, this is a great place to check out the Breckenridge Brewery. It's also got a big enough distribution that if you don't end up making it by the brewery, you can probably get a Breckenridge beer anywhere in Colorado. It's sort of growing in size, but I think they really do a good job of kind of staying true to their small roots. And anytime I see this on the shelf, I'll pick up some. I think it's a pretty decent one. Now, if you go to Buena Vista, and first thing you need to know if you get to Buena Vista is that's how you say it. I know that's not what your Spanish teacher in high school taught you, and your Spanish teacher in high school was correct if we're talking about a beautiful view. But if we're talking about the city, the way they know if you are not a local is if you say Buena Vista, right? And so it's sort of an Americanized term. But Buena Vista has a brewery called Eddie Line. Here's what you need to know is that this place is jam-packed on busier, sunnier days. So if you do decide to go there, it's a little bigger town, Buena Vista is, but it's still very walkable, especially if you're walking 500 miles. Basically, everything should be pretty walkable. And this one has a nice outdoor patio area, definitely has some good food and some good eats. It's in a really good spot. And also really good to know if you do decide to go into BV just for a stop, right? So if you just go in, it's about 210 miles down trail. There are a couple of exits you can take, I think to 211. And then heading over to Buena Vista, they do have a public shower facility in the city park. And so basically, if you're coming into town, there's one road that goes into town, one red light. You go straight across the highway and go all the way to the end where the road forks to the right, or turns to the right, and you can get a shower there. So take a couple of quarters, that kind of thing. There's also a great shop there. One of my favorite outdoor gear shops is in BV, and it's called the Trailhead. And they've got great sandwiches and great food. You can get a good beer there as well. But basically, Eddie Line, if you're just going for beer, that's the place I would go. If you want food and a little bit of gear, Trailhead's really great. I think that one's a really decent one. And BV is one of the better cities there. And you know, they also have, believe it or not, they've got a pancake shop that's been there forever called Jan's. And I don't know if I've ever mentioned it to you all. I hardly bring it up, but it's a restaurant that sort of has this near and dear kind of space for me, because it was there in Colorado when I lived there when I was only 6, and it was in a little different spot. They since moved it over there to BV. And Kirk there put in the comments, I want to point this out too, because this is really good. The laundry at the corner has a shower in BV. That's really good info, Kirk. I appreciate you sharing that. A lot of people would really like to be clean when they go in for food. If you don't have time to get a shower, then they're never going to see you again anyway. And if they do see you, you'll have scrubbed off all the dirt. So it doesn't super matter. But I do think getting a shower can be really good for that morale and that mental game. So absolutely stop in and get yourself a shower, clean your clothes, really good. And I think that's just such a great tip. I think also, Kurt, correct me if I'm wrong, but there's a really good burrito shop just a couple of doors down from the laundry place. So you can drop off your laundry, get it started, and then walk over, get a burrito, and then do the shower, that kind of jam. And then lastly here, this one is just a must stop. If you've never been to Salida, again, we are butchering the sort of Spanish pronunciations, but when you get to Salida, that's how the locals pronounce it. So in Salida, there's a place called Moonlight Pizza and Brew Pub. Incredible, right? And so the pizza is really, can you tell that I was raised on like Ninja Turtle diet. And it's just an incredible spot. Lots of good seating. The beer's really great. They've got deals often, and you get a pizza, split it with somebody, or you can take some. And what's also nice, it's worth knowing that sometimes if I'm by myself in a place like this, I'll get the pizza, get it to go, and then I'll take the pizza for the next day's lunch or dinner, because you don't really have to refrigerate it if you're going to have it right away. So it's a really good spot to go. And just a really good place to go. It's right around the corner from the hostel there in town. I like hostels personally because there are a lot of hikers there and it's a lot less expensive. But if you have the wallet, there are hotels nearby too. Salida is a little different than the other trail towns because it's one of the few where it's not as walkable, right? And so some of the stuff, if you want to go to say the Walmart, it's a pretty good hike, or if you stay in a hotel, then it's a hike to the grocery store, that kind of thing. So just be aware of that. There's not really as much kind of Uber system or infrastructure when you get out on the trail, but certainly check out Moonlight Pizza and Brew Pub. They've got a great outdoor seating area if you end up over there. Hey there, Mike. I grew up in Florida as well, so glad to see you there in the chat. I also if you want somebody you can trust about all things Colorado here, this one is really great. And I also appreciate that Miller and Debbie pointing out the root beer. I think that's also, this is a great time. The Colorado Trail is just a great time for you to go out. And if you decide not to drink or have beer, it's a great time to go out and kind of reset your whole body and system. And so you don't have to go out and just crush beer along the way. It doesn't have to be a big party. And I also think that homemade root beer, I believe it's homemade, correct me if I'm wrong, just a really good way to go when you get there. Now, Jerry there in the chat actually already, he already caught my honorable mention there. And so when you get to Durango, Carver's Brewery will give you your first beer free. And so actually just to show that I'm not making this up here, Jerry, I had put together a little slide. I'm glad you shared that though. Carver's is really a must stop, just because they'll give you that beer. And I love any of these places that are supportive of hikers, right? And so they love hikers. There's some places you'll get to along the trail where, I don't know exactly what's happened in the past. Maybe they've gotten some misbehaving hikers, that kind of thing. There's certainly places that aren't as welcoming to hikers and are not necessarily as excited about having us in groups there. So when you find a place that really embraces hikers, definitely stop in, definitely support them. I mean, it's also just a smart move, right? They get you in there, you get a free beer, and then you're going to buy a bunch of food because you've just hiked 500 miles. So I think it's just a great one to support. Really, really cool folks there. And Durango itself is kind of closer to Salida, and maybe even harder to get around without a car. I did want to pause for a minute, actually. I've been thinking about this a little bit. Tell me what you all think about this. I've been thinking a lot about getting back from Durango, and a lot of people really, really struggle. I see these questions show up all the time on the Facebook group. People are asking, how do I get back from Durango? And here's what I think. And I don't know if it's really worth a video on its own, but it's worth this, like my little pro tip for you all. A lot of people think of getting back from Durango. Here's what I do, or what I've done in years past, or what I did last year, maybe is the most appropriate or most accurate here. What I do is I drive to Durango first, park my car at their airport, and then take one of the new Frontier flights. They run flights 2 days a week out of Frontier, out of Durango, and they're typically about $60 to $100 a ticket. So you park your car $10 a day, fly to Denver, and then hike your way to your car. And the real advantage of this is that you don't have to worry about any of the timing issues, right? So if you buy a plane ticket and you're racing to try to get to the plane, that can end up being a problem. But if you know your car is waiting there and it's only $10 a day, that's a really great move. So that's just my little pro tip there. And I want to welcome here one of my favorite people, apparently snoring quite a bit. Can confirm that is probably accurate. And that is probably accurate. I think I heard you all the way from over here in Basement Studio there, Detail. So welcome to the party there. Was just telling people details about Jan's in Buena Vista. I thought they might like that little snippet of information there. Now, let's get to the heart of this. This is the stuff I was most excited about. I want to start first by talking about what I consider to be the 5 hardest segments of the Colorado Trail. Now, couple of caveats, because I want to make sure that I'm clear here. I try very, very hard to keep the channel really positive. Now, if we're talking about the hardest segments, that's inherently going to require us to say some things that might sound negative. But I don't think that hard or difficult segments have to be negative inherently. So I want to be really clear about this. That when I'm sharing some of these with you, these are places where I believe these are beautiful segments. They've got a lot to offer, but they just can be really hard. So I'm really only talking about these as and their difficulty specifically because my hope is as you're preparing and as you're getting ready, you'll feel really prepared for these and you can get mentally ready for it. So I love all the segments we're going to talk about. Maybe one I'm not as crazy about, but I think they're all really fantastic and you have to hike them anyway for the most part, with the exception of the segments that I talk about on the west or the east of the collegiate loop. So let's get right into it here. The first and what I consider one of the toughest sections is segment 10. This one is really tough because in segment 10, this is just outside of Leadville. You will hit some pretty big climbs. The climbs can be really steep. And because of where it is, you'll often be hiking through a little bit of mud. There's some mosquitoes. And then when you get over the climb to the other side, there are a lot of rocks in the trail, but not like little rocks. I'm talking big enough rocks that they can't even move them out of the trail. And so this is just one of those segments that truthfully, I think it's a beautiful segment. I think when you walk into the Holy Cross Wilderness specifically, it's one of the most stunning scenes that you're going to have, but it is a real challenge. And it's one of the few segments on the Colorado Trail with lots and lots of mosquitoes. So let me see here. I'm going to try to pull up here a little bit of a clip for you all and show you what segment 10 looks like. So I've never shared a video here, but let's see how this works. There we go. That's segment 10 here. And you'll notice again, really beautiful. Those pines are really incredible, just absolutely stunning. This one is, there's Sasquatch walks through. There it is right there. They said it wasn't real. And there he is just walking right through. Got him on camera, not blurry. And this is the magic of filmmaking here. So just a really beautiful segment. But again, you can kind of get a sense by looking at this of some of the sort of terrain and you get a little bit of that more heavily, like a lot more moisture in the water or the air, and so a lot more mosquitoes. These are not the rock sections, but you get a lot of that climb sort of earlier in that segment, and so just be aware of this one is a really tough one. It's also often right when you get back from Leadville. So a lot of people get to Leadville and they maybe have a couple of beers too many, that kind of thing. And then they end up back on the trail and then they've got a full pack of new heavy food, that kind of thing. So it can be a real challenge. But I do think it's a really beautiful segment. I think it's one that you're going to find really remarkable. And again, right when you get in that Holy Cross Wilderness, it's just spectacular and really, really incredible. And there are some really tough ones, as details points out there. They have some weather that can be really tough as well. And then also here, just pointing out what Mad Hippie said, they did the trail again. They did the trail in 2020, I believe, and did some really great ones. And specifically, I want to point out there that they talked about the personal achievement. And that's one of the things that I want you to be focusing on when you get out on the trail. Sometimes the payoff isn't in views, it's in realizing how strong you are and how capable you are, even if it's one of those nightmarish climbs where my hiking buddy calls them misery climbs, where you climb and climb and climb and you get to the top and it's not really a great view. That's still a great climb for you because it's going to mean that you've made it up something really incredible, something really beautiful. So absolutely encourage you to take some time and really celebrate your victories, even if the views are not necessarily the payoff that you had hoped for. Now, this is a classic example of a really tough, really hard segment, but this one is equal in payoff. So segment 7, you cross over the 11-mile range. I had the little pun there, 11-mile range. And this one is tricky because you will be leaving Breckenridge and you climb and climb and climb. And then at the top, every time I've done it, I've gotten caught in a rainstorm where you have to kind of go over a saddle and kind of you walk along the saddle, but you kind of hop over it as you go. And you're going to get to see a couple of clips of it. And it is one of the most beautiful segments. But when you get to the end of the climb, you'll walk on this really incredibly beautiful area. And then when you're at the end of that area, what will then happen is you will end up with this just incredible descent, right? So you can see here, the valley to the right is where Copper Valley Ski Resort, the Copper Ski Resort is over there to the right, Copper Mountain. That's the one, not valley, mountain. And you can see here winging it. He's still wearing his raincoat from that. It is just a really challenging climb and really mentally challenging. You can see the storm clouds up there, and it's early in the hike when a lot of people are not super familiar with how to handle rainstorms or lightning storms. And so being mentally ready for this can be really important. And then the knee breaker on the way down. It is absolutely just one of the most rapid descents. It's a roller coaster down. It is beautiful though. There's these little flowers again, that alpine region. It's one of the first times you spend a sustained amount of time well above tree line. And so it's really beautiful, really, really hard though, and really, really tough for a lot of people because again, it's about when you get that resupply. So if you get into Breckenridge, you end up getting a resupply, filling up your bag full of new food, and your bag is heavy again. Now, here's one of the things a lot of people have figured out, and I still haven't tried it yet, but I think I might this year. What they'll do is they'll use the free shuttle system. So they will go to the Gold Hill Trailhead, check into a hotel in Breckenridge or Frisco, then they'll take 2 nights. So they will go from their hotel, slack pack it. They'll leave everything but food and water at home. And then they'll go climb over this segment, get to the Copper Mountain Resort, and then take the bus back to their hotel. And then the next morning, they'll take the bus back over to Copper and start back up again. And that is such a great idea. I absolutely love that idea. I think it's so smart. And so really worth giving it a shot there. And I think that it's one that you're probably going to enjoy as well, but it's hard. It's really hard, and the weather can be a real challenge for a lot of people. Let's talk about this one because this is one that will not be on your radar if you're just looking at the elevation chart. Segment 4 doesn't look scary at all. Here's the problem though. When you get to segment 4, it starts about 40 miles into the trail. So that's for most people day 2 or 3, not day 2, day 3 or 4. And so your legs will be as sore as they're going to be. You don't have your trail legs yet, and they're sore from hiking the first 2 days with the heaviest pack you're going to have. So this is a really, really tough one. It starts with this really steep climb up a Jeep road. So as you're going up the Jeep road, there are big rocks in the way, makes it a little bit hard to kind of get your footing about you. And it's really exposed. So you tend to, not really exposed, I'm sorry, it's really hot because it's still low in elevation. So this one is a really challenging one, but a lot of people do find it really beautiful, especially when you get to the top. So you hike to the top of this sort of summit, and it really is beautiful. And then when you come down the side, you kind of hit this beautiful long valley. I really love the segment. I think it's a really beautiful segment, and I think it's well worth kind of enjoying, but it's also well worth being ready for it mentally. One thing I always talk about is that you can take some chocolate with you and have a really high-end piece of bar of chocolate. So when I say high-end, I'm thinking like $4 or $5 a bar, and have it there for morale. So whenever your morale gets low, crack open a piece of chocolate, and that's just such a good way to go to keep your head in the game and making sure that you are keeping your mental state kind of solid. So this is what the trail kind of looks like here. It is not a lot of views early in the hike when you're doing those big climbs, but you can see, because it's those lodgepole pines and it's also aspen trees, that the sun, especially at about 10:30, will start coming straight down on your shoulders, and the sun will add quite a bit of weight. Now, this segment is really stunning, though, in some really interesting ways. It's also one that when you get sort of halfway up the climb, there is a water hole before you hit the switchbacks. And if you go past the water about 200 yards, there's a really beautiful campsite off to the right. But a lot of people stop right at the water, and those are really steep campsites, and they tend to be really condensed. So when you get there, if you decide to stop near the first water source in segment 4, I encourage you to kind of plug along, go a little bit farther, not far, maybe a couple of, maybe go 250 yards, something like that. And I think you're going to find there's much better camping, and you can still backtrack just a couple hundred yards to get water. It's much flatter, that kind of thing. But the segment 4 it's a doozy. I mean, it really is a doozy. Now, this one is one, I don't have a video for it because I went west last year. Now, segment 12 is part of that Collegiate East. If you've been following my videos at all, you'll know that I encourage people pretty strongly to go west. And it's because of segments like segment 12. Segment 12 has 2 really, really hard climbs, 2 climbs that I would put in the top 5 of the entire trail. They're really steep, a lot of pea gravel there. And what it means is because the trail is so steep and gravelly, you'll sort of slip a lot and kind of lose your traction. So it's kind of one step forward, half a step back kind of situation. And then when you get to the very top, you're still pretty much below tree line. And so the views tend to be a little bit more obscured. So the mental game can be really tough. The east is really hard. And that's one of the things that I think is sort of underappreciated when people are making a lot of those sort of decisions about going east or west. A lot of people make this sort of assumption that the east is easier because it's generally lower in elevation, and I think the east is probably harder when you factor in the mental game, because on the west you get these beautiful stunning vistas, and so your work is rewarded much more frequently, so it's easier to stay in the game even though you are running a higher risk of being up and exposed when storms come in. And so you have to be really mindful of that. It doesn't mean that you're in any major danger, but it's a really, really tough area that collegiate east is, especially when you start out. The first three climbs in the east are three of the hardest climbs of the entire Colorado Trail. They can just be really, really tough. But they're the original route. And I think if everybody is going out to do the trail, you should at least do the east sometime in your life. And the last section of the east, when you go up that South Fooses Creek drainage, is really beautiful. And it's the most sort of the flower and plant life is the most beautiful that I think I've seen on the whole trail, especially if you like some of those other colors that aren't those alpine flowers. I don't know what I'm talking about. You get the idea. It's a beautiful valley. This segment 24, stunning, beautiful destroyer. It's absolutely one of the most beautiful segments. I think it's stunning. But if you look at the data book, so make sure that you pick up your data book if you don't have it already. When you look at the data book, it'll have these elevation charts at the bottom here, right? Look at that. It's sort of hiding them. Oh, that's kind of cool. But segment 24, you will descend just so gnarly rapidly. I think Details told, correct me in the chat there, Details, you said something like 27 switchbacks to start. So you will be way up above tree line. You'll be at about 13, 12, 5, 12, 7,000 feet, just cruising, and then the bottom will fall out and you will drop down these switchbacks that are really steep and really treacherous, really rocky, craggy, and make your way down into the Animas River and the Elk Creek drainage. Really, really hard. And then when you get to the Animas River, then you have a straight up climb back to get to Mullis Pass. It's really, really hard. Let me see if I can load up here and give you a little bit of a view of it. Full disclosure on this one, I'm not actually sure that when I show you this clip, this isn't a different segment. And so this is close. And this was last year, actually, in 2020. You can tell that I had sort of messed up my stabilizer function on my camera, but notice that you're way, way, way up above tree line. And then in another clip coming up shortly, you're going to see that the bottom literally just falls out. It's just incredible. I believe the cover of the newest Colorado Trail data book has a picture of that Elk Creek drainage. And so when you're up at the top of this high alpine plain, when you look at this sort of the fall off, it's gives me goosebumps. It's so beautiful, but it's also really, really hard. And I think at this point you're often really tired. So if you look here in this part of the clip, you can kind of see off to the edge how the bottom kind of falls off. And that's what makes it so tough, is that descent. One of the things for those folks here who are new to through hiking, a surprising thing that I learned is that it's not the climbs that are the hardest, it's the descents. I mean, really and truly. And that we're going to talk a little bit about that when we start talking about gear, is when you hit those descents, you have to be really mindful of your footing and your ankles and your knees. And that's why having a pair of trekking poles is really critical. It's really clutch for this. There it is right there. So at the end of this segment here, you can kind of see the bottom will just kind of fall off. It's right where the Continental Divide Trail will fork off to the left. This might be a totally different segment. Who knows, anybody? If we're going to have a fight in the chat, this might be the place to do it. Tell me what segment that was. It looks like it's a tough one. It does look here like it was 27 switchbacks here, and it's just rough. But do check out their Girl Plus Dog Adventures. Details there did a fantastic series of hiking the trail with Remy. You can see Remy in the picture there. Really good hiking dog. They went and hiked that, and she definitely she took a little bit of a slip on camera there on her segment 27 or segment 24 video. Really nicely done videos, really beautifully done. I might be a little bit biased, but I think you'll all agree with me. But definitely had a slip there, and I had a couple of slips as well at different points, but not on camera. And here, Hike with Mike points out, you do need a lot of sunscreen. It's really easy to get sunburned out there because you don't feel it. I mean, it's the weirdest thing, but by way of distance from Earth to the sun, you're not that much closer, but by way of the sort of protection that you get from the atmosphere, it's tough. It's really a lot of exposure there. Beautiful, though, one of my favorite segments, but very, very hard and very challenging in that one. Well, let's talk for a minute. Let's take a little bit of a break here for just a second and talk about gear that is perfect for the Colorado Trail. And so kind of working through here, the first piece of gear, and I want to talk about these. I kind of mentioned them a moment ago. Trekking poles. So got a new pair of trekking poles. These are just inexpensive Amazon trekking poles, and you can get whatever kind of trekking poles you want. A lot of folks will buy them from Costco. There's a couple that are really valuable there, or valuable, really affordable there from Costco. So Costco trekking poles are just fine for this, I believe. Check out some of the reviews, but getting a pair of trekking poles is a great idea. If you get lighter trekking poles, that can also be really helpful for preventing sort of elbow soreness and pain, but they absolutely will save your knees. It also, for those of you who are trying to figure out footwear, good pair of trekking poles will allow you to pare down to some trail runners rather than those big ankle boots, and thinking through how much weight you have. If you take your shoes, you take 6 ounces off of each shoe because you went from big heavy boots down to some trail runners, then that's a lot less weight over the course of a lot of miles, a long set of miles. So really important there. Definitely get a pair of trekking poles, try them out. I know a lot of people are sort of averse to trekking poles. They think, I don't want to look like that on trail. Truth be told, you're out in the middle of nowhere. If anybody sees you with trekking poles, they're going to understand. It's more likely that you'll be judged on the Colorado Trail for not having trekking poles than having them, but nobody's really judgmental anyway. So get a pair of trekking poles. You know what I mean? Just do it. It's worth it. So let me take a sip here, and then we're going to get back to this list here. That was number 5 of gear for the Colorado Trail. All right. Next item is a sun hoodie. This one here, Hike with Mike kind of already pointed out to us that sunscreen and sun protection is really important, and a good sun hoodie is really important as well. So a sun hoodie is basically just a long sleeve, light synthetic fabric shirt that will come up over your head and shield you from those UV rays. They make a number of different ones that you can get offline. You can get inexpensive ones. They don't have to be super costly. But what I will say is you want one that's really breathable. And that's why you're going to pay more money for the nicer ones. I went with a really inexpensive one that you'll probably see if you watched any of my hike videos from last year. It was the bright blue Columbia hoodie that I wore. And it wasn't terribly expensive, maybe about $30 or so, but it was so thick that it didn't breathe very well. It kind of got clammy. But if I would have spent a little more money, I could have gotten a nicer material that would have breathed a little better and been just as effective for keeping the sun out. So I would encourage you to make sure that you check that fabric and make sure that it's breathable. It was really some points, especially when we got into segments 19, 18, and 19, those really exposed flat segments when you're making good time, but you're really exposed. That ended up being pretty uncomfortable and kind of, again, nobody wants to be clammy when they're out on the trail. Get a good sun hoodie. It's a really good way to go. Now, next one here is some type of a container for trying cold soaking. So this can be the little plastic Talenti jars. You can also go and find Farmer's Fridge jars now, are about the same size. Those are really good. I like them both. Here's the deal, though. Even if you're not a cold soaking person, if you are just adamant, I don't want to cold soak, that's okay. What I would encourage is still try it. Try it for some segments. So take your stove with you, and if you don't like the food, try you can go back to the stove. But I think there's some really great spots where you can really try cold soaking or try some of the stoveless stuff. And that was a game changer for me, that I went from having a stove in 2020. And when I got to Salida, I switched it up and tried, you know what? I'm going to see a car in a couple of days. I'm going to have a ride out to town when I get to Lake City. So I'm going to try cold soaking. And I still had my stove. I ditched it right away because I found that I was able to put together a lot of foods that were either cold soak worthy or they were good for stoveless cooking. So peanut butter and tortillas, a lot of cheeses will keep, salamis, that kind of thing. A lot of great foods that you can get and really pare down your pack size as a result. And here's my favorite part. You're not going to miss the coffee as much as you think you will. I promise you that. You're going to miss the coffee a little bit, but you're going to be so grateful for how much lighter your bag is, a lot of it. So I encourage you to try some type of cold soaking or stoveless, even for a little while, even if you still take a stove with you. It's just a good opportunity to test your limits as a backpacker and have that backup in case you don't like it. So you can find some really great options while you're in town. And it's also great once you figure out that grocery list, and then you're not sending a bunch of macaroni and cheese for a lot of shipping costs to a place right next to a grocery store where you could buy the same macaroni and cheese, that kind of thing. Now, my favorite piece of gear is this one here. This is number 2, and you're going to understand why I'm saving the next one. Leukotape. This guy here, there's a link in the description because I love this stuff. This is great for blisters. It's about $7 a roll, and this is just absolutely my favorite thing. It's a new roll of Leukotape, and what you do is when you start feeling a hot spot, you take this out, you cut up a little piece, and you stick it to wherever you're feeling a little bit of hot spot, and this will absolutely keep you from getting blisters, or it will protect you in the afterward. It also will stay stuck to your skin as long as you want it to. That's through sweat, that's through water, you name it. This is just absolutely one of my favorite products. I can't believe I didn't know about it sooner. And what's also nice is it's so thin that if you try, say, Band-Aids or something, when you get a blister, even the little thickness of the foam on the Band-Aid, whatever you have gotten the blister from, is because there's not enough space. You're getting friction there. So having something super thin can be really helpful, and it will keep you from making it worse. This has saved more hikes than I can count, and it is absolutely not expensive. It's less expensive than moleskin, and moleskin comes off super easily in my experience. Love this stuff. If you don't have a roll, I encourage you to get one. It's worth knowing that they basically only last one season because they kind of get smushed up. And for whatever reason, if you take it in carry-on luggage, you probably will get stopped and they'll ask to see it. I think maybe there's some type of metal or some type of something in the adhesive. But Mad Hippies say you can put it on your trekking pole. I've seen people do that. It's a good idea as well. I've seen people take it and just get some wax paper and stick it to that so that they don't take the whole roll. I personally carry the whole roll because I see so many people out on trail who need it and maybe can benefit from that. But I think this one has just been a game changer for me. So highly encourage that. And we're thinking gear specific to the Colorado Trail. And this guy here, you've already seen it. Get yourself a data book. This is absolutely crucial. Mine is the thick, older version. It's the waterproof one. Fun fact, though, this is kind of funny. It's the waterproof paper, but the ink isn't waterproof. So if it gets wet, the whole thing disappears. I think it's pretty funny. But basically, the data book has to the 10th of a mile where you're going to find water, how likely it is to be running in the season. It's going to tell you, it's going to be able to look ahead. So the advantage of this over using, say, just far out, what used to be called gut hooks, the advantage is you can see the places where you need to stock up and camel up and really know in advance. So you'll be able to look ahead for the next 10, 15 miles and get a great sense of what's coming up down the trail. And so taking the data book and looking at it, it's really, really helpful for figuring out places where you need to stop for the night and whether or not they're going to be good camping options ahead. You don't need one for each person in the group as well. So I know that there are a few people here in the group who are hiking with children, for example. You don't need one for each person in the group. You just need one. And I love it. I think this is my favorite book for getting excited about the trip. So pick yourself up a data book. Be sure that you buy it straight from the Colorado Trail if you can afford it. I think it's only $20. They update it every few years. You can see the $20 here, updated every few years, and it's absolutely terrific, right? Kirk there. I really like that tip, Kirk. Thank you for that. You can put it on printer labels or return labels from Amazon orders, that paper that doesn't let the adhesive stick. That's a great idea. I hadn't thought about that. I love that. I think that's a great idea there. Really terrific. And this one here, Mad Hippies point out, absolutely the data book and Far Out is great for it's great to put together and work in tandem. So I'm certainly not a Far Out or a Gut Hook hater. I think it's a great resource. It's especially the thing about Far Out that's great for everybody is if people are posting about the water flow each year, and they typically will, then the places where the data book says you might have water, you might not, you can often confirm it, which will help you plan whether or not you can keep going with that with less water in your pack, which can be really, really helpful for a lot of folks out there who are trying to figure out whether or not they're going to make it to the next section sufficiently or with enough water as well. So here, let's go ahead and talk a little bit about, let's move over to some of the more beautiful segments of the hike. I love the Colorado Trail, and I love the segments that are just absolutely stunning. There's sort of, you're going to see there's probably a little bit of a bias toward those segments that get above tree line. Those are segments that make a lot of people nervous. Admittedly, a lot of people get kind of timid whenever they end up kind of thinking about being up above tree line. They think about lightning storms moving in quickly. I want to encourage you all, if you're still deciding whether or not to go east or west, don't let that be the deciding factor. There are a lot of ways that you can do a little bit of research to be aware of how to handle those high elevations. But what I can also tell you is that nobody who has gone west has regretted it, because it is just so absolutely stunning. So that's all I'll say about that. Let's talk a little bit about some of my favorite segments, though, and why I love them, what I think is terrific about each of them. Let's talk first here about segment 6. Segment 6 is obviously, it's early in the trail. It is, to my understanding, I believe it's the longest segment in the entire Colorado Trail. It's somewhere in the ballpark of about 30 miles. And this one is the one that goes up over Georgia Pass. And it's the first time you really get up above tree line. And the cool thing about Georgia Pass is you climb all morning. So depending on where you stop, it'll go from Kenosha Pass all the way to Tennessee Pass. And so you'll spend most of the early part of it climbing up that Georgia Pass. And Georgia Pass is just stunning. It's absolutely one of the more stunning segments. And so here are a couple of clips of what it looks like. This is Georgia Pass, and you can see there that's Nomad from my hike last year, and that's I believe that's Bart and a couple of folks. But this is right at the top, and the climb itself is, it's work, but it's really nicely gradual. You can see here that you're certainly going to be tired. The air is going to start getting thin, but you're spending a little bit of time up above tree line, and it's the first time you get that big reward for all of your effort. It's also where the Continental Divide Trail joins the Colorado Trail, and so there's some spots there where you're going to start seeing a little more traffic, or you might start seeing some traffic coming northbound on those CDT, depending on who's hiking it earlier in the trail. I think it's just a really beautiful segment. And I also think of this, I think you're spot on, Miller and Debbie, that it's your rite of passage. It's the first time where you get out there and you're just maybe 75, 80 miles in, and you finally, all of the hard work at lower elevation, getting through Waterton Canyon, crossing through the burn zone in segment 2, climbing up that huge steep climb in segment 4, passing all the dirt bikers, mountain bikers in segment 3. This is really your rite of passage. It's where most people who are not going to make it have already decided they're not going to make it. So this is really, if you make it to Georgia Pass, chances are really good you're going to make it to Durango should you choose to keep going. That if you get bumped off, it'll be something like you get called back for something off trail. But this is really that rite of passage. It's a great spot because it's a space where you get to the top, you'll have a little bit of cell phone service if you need to text somebody and tell them you love them, that kind of thing. And so it's just a great, it's just a great spot, sort of symbolically. And that's one of the things that I love about it. It's beautiful as well, but it's just a really great one. And that brings us then to our next segment, which is segment 8. Now, I know these are kind of going in order, and I promise they're not entirely in order, but there is sort of a theme here that as you move your way through the Colorado Trail, it gets better and better and better. So I really want to encourage you all, if you are still thinking of, if you are still starting out the Colorado Trail planning process and you get on the trail and you spend the first week and it starts feeling really tough, sort of mentally, it starts wearing on you, and it will. You will have highs and lows. That's the way you'll have highs and lows. That's the way it goes. Do you see me trying to change it because it was about to rhyme? I should have just leaned in. I don't know why I did that. You'll have these really high peaks, you'll have some deep lows, and you're going to have some struggles, and your blisters are going to start to flare up. And if you have knee pain, it's going to start hurting worse, and you're going to need to start taking ibuprofen, and maybe you'll start getting a little bit homesick and thinking, why am I doing this? And the sun will start, you get the idea. But as you go through the trail, I want you to know that it just gets better and better. And quite literally, every mile gets better in almost every way. So really stick with it. And so segment 8 here, though, is the one that goes from Copper Mountain Resort over to, gosh, where does it go? My brain just went completely blank on me there. Copper Mountain Resort to, is it Tennessee Pass? Did I say that wrong? I don't know. You get the idea. This is a great segment. Must be, I think somebody here is probably correcting me and helping us out a little bit. And that's what I love, is that I'm not always right about things, and you all are great about helping me to remember the things that I don't know. Love the community here. Somebody correct me here. Yeah, yeah. Be sure you will get Kokomo stuck in your head, everybody. So it's a great one to have there. Kokomo Pass and Sorrel Pass. So let's talk a little bit about this segment, and then I'm going to show you a little clip of it here. Basically what happens is you leave the resort, right? So you're going to leave Copper Mountain Resort, and then you're going to climb and climb. But the climb is similar to Georgia Pass, where it's hard, but it's doable. And then you're going to end up on this really beautiful, way high above tree line area. It's absolutely stunning. And the trail itself is, look at the trail, look at the ground on it. It's stunning. I mean, the walking is great. You don't have to worry about a lot of rocks. You're not necessarily going to trip. And you've got lots of good water, so you don't have to carry a whole ton. The sunshine is really beautiful. You'll pass Janet's cabin, this cabin that if you pass Janet's cabin and think anything other than I'm going to stay there at some point in my life, then you're crazy. You've lost your mind. But look at it. It's just absolutely stunning. You get way high up above the tree line there, and then it just sort of walks its way around the mountain, and then dips down and drops you down into Camp Hale. And so very much one of my favorite segments there. And you can see there, that's Winging It. He's having a little bit of a snack. Absolutely stunning and phenomenal segment. So very much looking forward to hearing how much you all love this one as well. I think this segment as well is interesting. Oh, I just turned it off. There we go. That's the Kokomo Pass. You'll have a sign there that'll tell you everywhere you go. And at this point, you kind of hook to the right and then drop down pretty rapidly. You go down into the basin, and you can see there. And it will be one of the places where you're likely to see one of your first really cold nights. And so each year when I go, that's one of the first times you get just a really super tough cold night. Did get some confirmation there. It's Copper to Tennessee Pass. So earlier when I said that segment 6 goes to Tennessee Pass, I believe it was Kenosha Pass. I think I was off on that one, but I might need you to correct me again on that. And this one again is another spot where it's many people's first 20-mile day on the trail. So a lot of people will find that as the trail goes on, those harder segments often are packed in the front, and your trail legs, you haven't gotten them yet. So as you go, typically you'll find you're going to build up the mileage as you go. So what that should also tell you is if you are a person who has planned out every single stop for the night, first of all, I commend you for trying. Second of all, it's probably not going to work because you're going to run into rainstorms. You're going to have some challenges along the way, and that's okay. What I want to let you know, though, is if you feel like you're behind schedule, you do the math and you say, I'm only averaging this many miles and I need to get to Durango, and so I'm not averaging enough to get to Durango. Don't worry. Don't worry, because a lot of people pick up bigger miles as they go for 2 reasons. One, you get better at hiking. Your legs come in pretty quickly. The other reason is that a lot of times when you get later in the trail, you're going to find that the trails themselves are really nicely graded. You're going to have a better sense of how to get over those peaks. And those misery climbs that I mentioned, almost all of those are early in the trail. And so you're going to have a lot better opportunity to make up that ground later on. So don't be discouraged if you start out averaging fewer miles a day than you would hope to or than you needed to in order to finish on time. Chances are still really good that unless you are doing, say, 2 miles when you need to do 30, you're probably still going to make it to Durango on time and still be fine with it. So don't be discouraged if that happens. But that Kokomo Pass is just incredible. It's one of my favorites, and you kind of spend some time in this bowl. Just incredible. I think you're all going to love it. Now let's talk about here Collegiate West 3. This one goes from Cottonwood Pass to Tin Cup Pass Road. This one, if you've been watching my videos, you know that Tin Cup Pass is one of my absolute favorite segments on the entire Colorado Trail. This segment is insanity. Now, one thing to know is Cottonwood Pass on the west is at a parking lot. So it's on a paved road that comes straight up from Buena Vista in one direction and goes to Gunnison in the other direction. So it's a really easy one for picking up a hitch because you just stand around with your big old backpack and say, walk over to the parking lot and start striking up conversations, because anybody who's in that parking lot is either coming from Buena Vista or probably going right back to Buena Vista because there's nothing between it. So strike up a conversation and you can often get a ride back. You can also probably get into Gunnison that way. Although what I will say is it's going to be a lot harder to get back to the trailhead from Gunnison than it will be Buena Vista, because one way Buena Vista is only about maybe I think 15, 20 miles, maybe 9 miles. It's not super far into BV, although it's probably about 40 miles over into Gunnison. But that's a really good one for thinking about as a resupply option. Or if you need to have somebody meet you there as a shuttler, you can get the shuttlers list from the Colorado Trail Foundation. And it's super easy to say, I'll be here at this spot. Be sure to give extra time for yourself to get there, because it can be kind of stressful if you're trying to hike really quickly to meet a ride that you know is waiting on you there. Let's take a look at this one, though, because you're going to see pretty instantly why I find this to be just an absolutely stunning segment. Last year, we had some forest fires. That's something that I think everybody needs to be aware of, that as the dry weather sets in, we've had a low snow year generally. There is a fair chance that you may need to make some adjustments for forest fires. I hope not, but just know that we had a pretty good forest fire. But here, you're way above tree lines, really beautiful. You have to be aware of storms, making sure that you're hiking a little bit earlier in the day and being aware of that. But there are a few spots below tree line. So if you are a hammocker, absolutely, you can hammock through this segment. You just have to be a little more cautious about, or more intent on, stopping earlier when you see some trees that are worth stopping in. And so absolutely one of the more stunning segments, and definitely think you're going to love it. If you are just looking to get a taste of the Colorado Trail, you can also go to Cottonwood Pass and hike in maybe 7 or 8 miles and then do an out and back and come back. You can do that in a day because there's not a ton of elevation gain and fall through that segment. So most people who are reasonably fit can do that in a day. And then when you get back into Buena Vista, there's this pancake place called Jan's. So you can go to Jan's and get a pancake and have some food there. Have I mentioned that already? There's pancake place, Jan's. I don't know. If I haven't, then you just found out about it. And if I have, I've reinforced it for you. So you're welcome, everybody. But anyway, so Collegiate West segment 3, absolutely stunning. It was also, to be fair, really hard to pick a segment in the Collegiate West that was going to be my favorite. And it's also worth knowing that the photo behind me here is it is the climb at Hope Pass. So this is how you start the Collegiate West, is going up Hope Pass. Absolutely phenomenally stunning. And here, if you look over, that's the valley. So you climb up, and then the valley, let me see if I can get my finger here to point to it. That valley right there is where you climb up through that area, and you will see some just stunning sights on your way to Lake Ann Pass, and lots of great stuff there. And they did a great job, the Colorado Trail Foundation, moving the trail off of the Forest Service Road. And so now you have this really beautiful walk along this creek, a lot of really beautiful stuff there. And yeah, it's just, I love it. I love it. The whole Collegiate West. If you haven't made up your mind yet, again, I'm going to encourage you, go west, young man or woman or whomever you are out there, go west. So let's talk a little bit here about where I promised you they weren't all in order. So we're going to jump ahead. So the first 4 are in order: Indian Trail Ridge and Taylor Lake in segment 27. These are bananas beautiful. I mean, truly the most stunning scenes. And it is a really challenging segment sort of mentally, because you do not want to be on Indian Trail Ridge when a storm comes in. It is notorious for lightning strikes. So this is one where you want to make sure that you are going and being diligent about finishing this segment, or at least being off of Indian Trail Ridge. It's about a 4-mile segment. You're going to see it in just a second, where you will be way high above elevation, or above tree line rather, and you will want to make sure that you are down at Taylor Lake. So basically the 4 miles before Taylor Lake, when you're planning, you want to be through those 4 miles at Taylor Lake before about 2 in the afternoon if there's weather coming in. And be very careful, because my hope for you all is when you get out there, going on this segment is a positive memory that you love and look back on and think, I can't believe I was so lucky to be able to get out there and hike that. Because what you're going to see here is stunning, right? And so this was a day where there were some clouds. It was really pretty scary, or at least it was tough. We had to make some tough decisions about whether or not we are going to keep going. But imagine this and just kind of take it in, and realize that this is one of the more beautiful areas that I've seen. I did a little bit of time lapse here trying to catch some of the lightning, and the lightning was on the next ridge over and kind of stuck there for maybe 2 hours. I stayed and waited at the bottom of the Indian Trail Ridge trying to go over, but just be very careful, and that way you can enjoy it. But this is just what the Colorado Trail was made for, was views like this. Absolutely stunning, right? And so here, Kirk here, Kennebec. Those of you who watched my trail video, you'll know that Kennebec is one of my favorite words to say. It just kind of rolls off the tongue. So Kennebec, Kennebec. I encourage you to say it yourself. Say it to strangers on the street. Just walk up, look them solid in the eye, and say Kennebec, and then walk away. And if they don't know, they don't know. Really phenomenal segment. And it's the last really truly stunning view before you get to segment 28, which segment 28 has its own special brand of beauty, but it's very different. It's very much, segment 28 is much more similar to some of the segments earlier in the trail, where you descend really quickly and really low. And so celebrating 2027 and spending as much time really soaking in the last big views of the Colorado Trail, I would encourage you to do so. And so without further ado, any guesses what we're going to do for the number one segment? I guess it might not have enough time for you all to respond quickly, but here, my favorite segment is segment 23, which includes Cataract Lakes and what I call the Gates of Narnia. And this one here is from the Carson Saddle, and it goes all the way over to Stony Pass. It is absolutely phenomenal. Cataract Lakes are beautiful. I ended up camping there a time or two, and I'm cautious about encouraging people to camp in a specific spot because I don't want to put too much pressure on that area. What I can tell you is that the Cataract Lakes are beautiful. They might not be the best for camping, even because the ground tends to be pretty soft there and kind of soak in some of that water. So what I would personally recommend is fill up on some water and then make your way through. But what you're going to see here in this segment is just what I call the Narnia section. And it's just I can't even get over, like, how do you even handle how beautiful it is? So basically what will happen is you're going to climb up from Carson Saddle, and you can kind of see the hiker up in the distance there, but you're going to go up in that little saddle. And then when you dip down, you're going to hit the Cataract Lakes, and over in that valley to the left, almost always, if you're up early in the morning, you'll be able to see some moose there. So that's really cool. And then when you get up there, it's just the trail itself. You can see my favorite kind of trail, where it's really some smooth walking and easy cruising. And, you can get way high up, and as Mad Hippies point out, you can stay up at really high elevations in this area, and it's really pretty special. What's also worth knowing is in this segment, especially when you get toward the sort of Cataract Lakes and somewhere closer to it, even though you're up above tree line, it still feels like you're sort of protected by the mountain. So I don't know that you are any more protected. I don't want to sort of say stay there, because if a storm comes in, you're fine. But what I can tell you is that it feels very different, that you don't feel as exposed. So that sort of mental state is different. It's truly one of the most beautiful places that I've seen on the entire trail. And it sets you up into that Narnia section when you're way high above all the different mountains and the elevation, and or you're way high up above the trees and spending some time in this really beautiful area. And then you're going to hit that 23 is just sort of a roller coaster kind of. You're going to dip down a little bit, you're going to climb up, dip down, but they're all pretty quick climbs. So you're going to get some rapid fire climbs in. There are also some of those hoodoos there, some rock formations that kind of stick out of the ground. Something like you would see in Bryce Canyon National Park is in that segment. So just love it. I mean, pay attention for wildlife. You can often see some big mule deer, some elk. You'll see them kind of just poking around, living it up, and having the time of their lives out there. So very much very much think that it's worth checking out. And here there are some really steep climbs without those switchbacks, but still something that you can handle. There are a couple that are pretty tough, but do recommend you kind of make your way through there and enjoy that and really soak it in, because it's just phenomenal. It is worth knowing. And that the sort of Leadville 100 kind of has a path that goes through there, I believe. There's definitely an ultra marathon that passes through there. And the night that I stayed at Cataract Lakes back in, must have been in 2016, I stayed there. It was the night, one of the year I met Winging It. And there was this group of women there, and they were really excited. They had some ultra runner that they really wanted to support on their hike. So they went and camped at Cataract Lake and stayed up all night because he was going to be running through at about 2, 3 in the morning. And sure enough, they woke up. We heard them sort of chortle. I don't know what the word would be. They got really excited, and we heard the runner come through, and they gave him a bunch of food that they had brought in. And then he took off on the rest of his ultra. And then the next morning they woke up, and I still remember they looked at their food and they said, "Oh no, the bread we gave him was moldy." So I don't know if he finished up his hike, but anyway, it was pretty hilarious that they had given him this ultra runner whose body is a finely tuned machine. They had given him moldy bread without thinking about it. I hope he's okay. I'm not laughing at him if he struggled with it, but I thought it was pretty hilarious that they went through all this effort and didn't even check the bread to make sure it was fresh. So I think that about covers it, everybody. I'm really grateful that you all joined me here. This was a little different kind of approach, talking about some of those top 5 lists, but I'm encouraged by all of you stopping in and sharing with me this time. We're going to be coming back next week or in 2 weeks with something new. I'm not quite sure what it's going to be just yet. So if you have ideas for kind of things you'd like me to cover, one thing that we've talked about is maybe talking about food and really getting into some of the best food options. So if you're interested in that, I'd be interested in hearing. Or we've talked a little bit about doing some group dynamics and talking about hiking maybe with children, hiking with people who are older, or maybe talking about hiking with partners, that kind of thing, and figuring out how exactly you go about attempting such a monumental feat and weigh all of the different personalities that are involved. Me personally, I think it's a great idea often to jump off into the trail and go solo and find your tramily, because then you're going to be around people who hike like you just by default. But at the same time, sometimes you want to go with somebody and take somebody, or take children, or take your parents before they're too old to really hike. And so we can talk about that. I see Ruth there, food. I think that's, I'm a big fan of talking about the food. So if I can find the right person to come talk with us about food, I don't want to just tell you about my favorite snacks, because I'll just end up eating a bunch of food. But absolutely, if we can find somebody who is knowledgeable, I would love to talk about food and nutrition on the trail. I think that'd be really worthwhile. So I think that about covers it. What I will say is I'm going to go through the chat here. I'm going to assemble all the names of anybody who's commented. So if you've not commented yet, be sure you comment shortly. And then what I will do is later today or early tomorrow, I will make the drawing here for the Outside Comfort Zone stainless steel wine glasses. So make sure you comment there. And then also, had some great news this week, got up to 900 subscribers, but it was sort of, it was added to the news that Details and Girl Plus Dog Adventures passed me, and I don't think I'm ever going to catch up with her again. But if I have any chance of catching up with her again, please click that subscribe button. Be sure you keep up to date on all of the different installments of the Colorado Trail Talk. Congratulations to Details. Great job passing that 900 mark. Beautiful videos. Go check those out. Be sure you also check out Mad Hippies and their videos. They've got some great stuff. And also, check out this one here. Tangent Trails has been doing some really beautiful hikes out there in the Texas area, doing some really cool ones and putting together some great videos with some solid soundtracks. And especially his videos, if you like videos where you can kind of put it on and kind of lose yourself in the hike and not have me chattering at you, then great video to watch. Be sure you check out Jerry and Tangent Trails over there. There's some pretty great ones. And so yeah, A lot of great creators here. Grateful for you all checking in and spending this time with us. I think that about covers it, everybody. Have a great week. Have a great night. And I will talk to you all soon. This is Snackbox out. Thanks, everybody.